Welcome back to the channel. I want to show you guys a little EQ and compression so you can balance out your music and your voiceover so it sits properly in a mix. Let's check out what we have here.
All 7 continents, 18 countries. It was very important that everything was real. If it was possible to shoot it, we wanted to go shoot it. If we couldn't get the shot or the weather wasn't right, we would either go back to that location, stay at that location longer, or it didn't make the movie. It was really important. Every shot was original and that everything was real. But there's a few things, only 3 or 4 shots in the whole film, that are impossible, physically impossible shot.
Let me show you what it was like before. I have a duplicate copy. Everything's in default, and if we look, we have nothing going on our mixer here. No plugins, no inserts. There's a little bit of a volume change, it looks like, on the fader. I'll put that back. The volume for each of these tracks are at 0. So this is where it was sitting when I first got the material. So as you can tell, we can't hear anything and it's really fighting. So let's go through and break down what we did to get everything to sit properly. So on the VO track, let's solo it out and we'll hop back over to Fairlight here. And what I have going on is some EQ and compression. So let's start out with the compressor first. Compressor's job is essentially, it can be used for tone or it can be used for controlling dynamics. So those will take loud things and make them a little quieter, and it'll take quiet things and bring them up. So your range between how loud it is and how quiet it is will be squashed down a bit. So let's bypass this EQ and we'll take a look at the waveform on his dialogue or voiceover, and I will shut the compressor off. And we're going to pay attention. Here's a peak right here and here's a quieter part. Let's just listen to the dynamic change between this and that.
Thing was real. If it was possible to shoot it,
so you can see how loud it gets with the possible to shoot it. I have a limiter on here to kind of catch it from going too high, and we do have some makeup gain, which is making it quite a bit louder. I turned on the compressor. A brief overview of a compressor is you have a threshold, which is where it intersects this line here. So if the signal is loud enough, it'll hit the threshold, or you could bring it down where if it's quieter and it meets the threshold. Then you have a ratio, and that would be like 1:1 is 1 volume level in is 1 out, or 2:1, for every 2 you'll get 1 out. And then you have a knee here, which if we look at this line, you can see it kind of turns a little sharper. This is how aggressive the top of that limit is, and you can make it a little smoother. So it's almost like when you apply this limiter here, you can see we have a limiter does like a sharp line, where that's saying like a brick wall ceiling. That's essentially what the knee does, whether it's a little bit more of a line or if it's smoother letting the signal in. The mix control, 0 is all compression and 100 is all original signal. And then I've adjusted the attack, hold, and release to match his dialogue or the timing of his speaking. So if your attack is too fast, it'll clamp down on your signal too quick. Hold is how long it'll stay in compression when you've reached the threshold. And then release is after the signal's done. If he stops talking in this case, will it release the compressor? So I've kind of adjusted this to go with his dialogue to time it, but not clamp it down. I'll adjust a few of these just to show you what it'll do by example.
Continents, 18 countries. It was very important that everything was.
So if we add the attack too fast,
all 7 continents, 18 countries.
See how it kind of takes a minute to bring that voice down? You'll hear it peak up and then ramp down.
All 7 continents, 18 countries.
So we need a faster attack so it'll know it'll start working quicker.
All 7 continents, 18 countries.
Now hold is if I start and stop, you can see in between the lines. Let's go from this word here
is real
to here. This spot where he's not speaking, if the hold was longer, you'll see this gain reduction stay open longer.
It was real.
See how it's still open? So that means it's taking that long before it actually releases.
Was real. If it was possible,
you want it to kind of time with their cadence. And then the release If we go too fast,
written that everything was real.
see how it's so quick? It's with every single line of dialogue, it's shutting on and off.
That everything was real. If it was possible.
This will cause like a pumping effect. And also, it won't be a smooth, like fader kind of letdown after he speaks. If you want it to have a nice gradual release, you'll give it a little bit longer of a release time.
Everything was real. If it was possible to shoot it, we wanted to go shoot it. If we couldn't get the shot or the weather wasn't right, we would either go back.
All right, so that's kind of working with his dialogue timing. It's not pumping too harsh, and it is giving it some makeup gain, and this gain reduction is telling us how much it's reducing the higher peaks here.
18 countries, it was very important that everything was real. If it was possible to shoot it, we wanted to go shoot it. If we couldn't get the shot or the weather wasn't right, we would either go back to that location.
As a general rule of thumb, you want to give it the makeup gain that it's reducing. So if you were to turn this on and off, you wouldn't be able to hear a difference. But sometimes you do need it to add a little bit of volume to your signal. Just make sure you're not going over on your output, which is why I have a -5 limiter on here.
18 countries, it was very important that everything.
But if we're getting around -6, we can bring this down. I'll just show you what we're talking about here if we were to balance it.
Was real. If it was possible to shoot it, we wanted to go shoot it. If we could.
So you could hear when he says possible to shoot it with it off, it's kind of loud.
If it was possible to shoot.
And if we turn it on,
if it was possible to shoot it, we wanted to.
It's much more controlled. Okay, so that takes care of compression. It's not quite so loud, and the quieter parts are a little bit louder. I'm going to give it a little more gain.
Everything was real.
And then I did some EQ. So let's talk about EQ for a second. A lot of people will just boost things up. And the way I was taught was to do reductive EQ. Now, if you notice band 1 here, I have a big roll off, and band 6, I have a roll off. Let's watch the frequency analyzer as he's speaking.
If it was possible to shoot it,
you can see right here, all that lower information. He's not even making any frequencies here or in this upper register.
We wanted to go shoot it. If we couldn't get the shot.
Now, you might not think that matters, but as you add tracks and you can actually reduce that bandwidth, you can think of it as removing all those signals. It could be some rumble, could be some room noise. And if you're sending this into the compressor, it's going to boost that up as well. So this is actually cleaning that up before it hits the compressor, because in my order I have it EQ, dynamics, and then effects. So the EQ is the first thing it's passing through. And then if you noticed on band 4 here, I have a little dip. Let me boost that back up and I'll show you what that sounds like.
Or the weather wasn't right, we would either go back to that location, stay at that location longer, or it didn't make the.
So you can hear it's kind of got like a hollow sound. A lot of your sources, you'll find some offending frequencies or weird noise, sibilants, things like that. You can reduce those out before you compress it, and it actually makes the compression sound a lot better. So that's essentially what was done to this interview track, was just work the dynamics with the compressor, put a limiter just so it doesn't shoot over, and then a little bit of EQ with a little bit of presence here on band 5. I'll roll that one on and off for you.
18 countries, it was very important that everything was real. If it was possible to shoot it, we wanted to.
So it gives them a little bit of clarity in the top end. Okay, now let's get on to the music, where we want the music and the dialogue to sit nicely. So I do have a compressor on the music, but if you'll notice, it says sidechain on. And there's a studio only feature here. If I was to click on the track, we have a ducker. And as you can see, it says source. And you could choose whatever source. This one says VO. And then there's a duck amount. But that's a studio only feature. Now what that does is lowers the volume of the music when that VO track has an active piece on it. So it's kind of like when you're listening to the radio or something, or a TV ad, and the music gets quieter when the voiceover speaks. That's called ducking. We can do that with a regular compressor here without having the studio version. So this dynamics is open on the music track. I have the compressor on, but I have sidechain on, telling it to listen to the VO track. Now, if we hit listen, this is going to play the incoming signal on this track. So if I mute this voiceover and I turn that off and I play it, but we hit listen, this is the actual signal coming into the compressor on audio 2. And you could see it says sidechain here, and you could see some incoming signal.
Important that everything was real.
So now I'm going to have the music turned down whenever this VO is active, as long as this sidechain is on. So let's rewind it, and now we'll listen to what the music does as soon as he starts speaking.
All 7 continents, 18 countries. It was very important that everything was real.
So I'll mess with the threshold just to show you what it would do in this particular case.
All 7 continents, 18 countries. It was very important that everything was real.
So it's almost like we have a certain amount of gain happening, or gain reduction. I have no makeup because I don't want to boost the signal louder. And then I have it almost about a 2-to-1. It could probably go up a little bit more. Let's listen to that.
All 7 continents, 18 countries.
Well, let's turn that off and you can hear the difference.
All 7 continents, 18 countries. It was very
Music's way too overpowering. Turn on that compressor.
All 7 continents, 18 countries. It was very important.
And it's a good, natural, smooth transition because of the settings here with the attack, hold, and release. If you notice, the release is all the way up to 4,000 milliseconds. If we go down to the last line of voiceover here, you're going to see how it's going to respond. If it was faster, if we decrease the length of the release, you're going to get this abrupt jump in the music level. So I won't go all the way, but I'll go like midway. So as soon as he's done talking, you're going to hear this ramp up in the music that's kind of jarring.
Film that are impossible, physically impossible shot.
So you hear that little, yeah, it just jumps up.
Physically impossible shot.
So to get that to be a smooth release, we're going to watch this gain reduction. I'm going to turn the release time all the way. That just happened to work out pretty good for this particular track. But now we'll get almost like a smooth volume control or fader move.
That are impossible,
right here.
physically impossible shot.
So see how that gain reduction just gently slopes down? That's the release time. So the attack was when he started talking. The hold would be in between his lines. So a good example of that would be right here, where there's some dialogue and then a little bit of a pause. If the hold time is too fast, it'll jump up. So let me show you that example, and we'll pull the hold time down. So now watch how quickly the music jumps up in between this little line here.
Everything was real. If it was possible to shoot it, we wanted to go shoot it. If we couldn't get the shot or the weather wasn't,
well, my release might be slow enough it didn't do it.
It was real.
There you go. So now you could hear with the faster release, it's actually doing that.
It's real.
So we don't want the music to jump up there. So we want it to hold under the compression a little bit longer.
It was real. If it was
So now there's a little reduction, so that'd probably sound a little more natural. Watch it bounce right here in between lines.
It was real. If it was possible to shoot it, we wanted to go shoot it.
So it's not so slow that it's going to make an abrupt noise.
It was real. If it was possible to shoot it, we wanted to go shoot it. If we couldn't get the shot or the weather wasn't.
So in this case, because our release time's so high, it's not as drastic. You can hear it if the release time was a little bit slower and if there was a longer break in between the dialogue. Let's listen to this line here.
The whole film that are impossible, physically impossible shot.
Okay, so that's how you get a nice smooth roll off into the music, basically the release time on this sidechain compressor. Now, one other thing I did to make things sit a little nicer, if you'll notice we got EQ on the music. This isn't going to be a massive thing, but if we look at his EQ while he's speaking, and we'll solo out his voiceover real quick.
All 7 continents, 18 countries. It was very important that
you can see he's got a little spike here just below 1K. So that means he's a little more prominent in that frequency. So what I did was on the music bed, I just took a band here and actually went a little higher, but we could come down just a notch and dipped it out. And I didn't go a super small cue. I went a little bit of a semi-wide. And what this is going to do is carve a little room in that frequency range in the music to allow his voice to come through. So I'm going to solo out the music here and I'll toggle this on and off. And you're not going to hear a huge difference, but listen to it once we add the dialogue back in. So there is a little bit of reduction. I'll boost it up so you could hear it a little more. Okay, so I went down maybe 5 dB or so originally. You can hear some of the highs come back, but now if we have his voice along with it, this is going to give a little room over top of the music track to let his voice cut through.
18 countries, it was very important that everything was real. If it was possible to shoot it, we wanted to go shoot it.
So I can hear that, especially in the headphones here. If I toggle this on and off, he just gets a little more prominent.
Very important that everything was real. If it was possible to shoot it, we wanted to go shoot it. If we couldn't get the shot or the weather wasn't...
So it's pretty subtle, but it actually makes a nice difference. So that's a few ways you can balance out your dialogue in your music bed, both using EQ and compression. And then one last tip that I can give you guys, and if you notice on my effects, I have a vocal channel, and this is sort of like a mini version of what we're doing here. You have this high pass filter, which is pretty standard, just to roll off a lot of the lows, and then if you had a few offending frequencies, you could dial them out or up in here. And then we also have a compressor. So this one I dialed back a little bit less power. And the thought behind that is, let's say you stack compressors. Instead of making one do like a whole lot of work, you could actually add one in and make it work a little. And then the signal's a little more compressed and a little more manageable. And then you add a second compressor. And then that one isn't working with such a wildly dynamic signal. It's kind of controlled as it hits the second compressor, and then that'll like let it work a little less hard and a little more natural sounding. So I added one here as well. I'll shut this off and then I'll turn it on just so you could hear what this little bit of extra compression is going to do.
18 countries, it was very important that everything was real. If it was possible to shoot it, we wanted to go shoot it. If we couldn't get the shot or the weather wasn't right, we would either go...
So, I mean, this might be 3 dB of gain reduction, and I have it at 1.2 of makeup gain. Not a lot going on. EQ's not doing anything either. So it's just a touch more control. You could probably take it or leave it on that one, but if you wanted to stack them a little bit more, or depending on the compressor you wanted to use, some add a tonal characteristic more so than just a nice neutral sounding compressor that pretty much controls dynamics. But that's it. A little bit of EQ, a little bit of compression to help balance these out and remove some of the frequencies, and then carving out that little bit on the music bed. The only other extra sauce I guess you could put on would be doing a little bit of fader automation. You could do that if you had some words that were a little too loud, or you wanted to dip the music down. And you can always go in here. Let's say we were going to do a fader move and we didn't like this word. You can grab your range tool and you could literally just grab that down a little bit. Things like that, if you were wanting to do that. But that's about it. All right, thanks for watching, and I will see you guys on the next video. Leave a comment down below. Subscribe if you haven't already. I always want to see that subscriber count going up, and it really helps me out. Thank you for watching. I'll see you on the next one.